Forget what you learned in school. This is history's unhinged side.
Uh,
Welcome to Lifespan, the weekly podcast that digs up the dirt on the most outrageous, chaotic, and downright WTF lives ever lived.
that's us.
You might think of vampires as creatures of fiction, all capes and brooding, but believe me, real history conjures figures far more monstrous.
Oh, definitely. Individuals whose stories really fueled those very vampire myths.
This week, prepare yourself for a bizarre journey.
That's right. Forget this over screen for a moment. We're embarking on this bizarre journey to uncover, well, the top 5 historical figures whose lives, their actions, maybe even what happened after they died, eerily echo the chilling characteristics of the vampire.
And this isn't your grandma's history lesson, folks. This is history served raw, unsettling, and maybe even a little darkly entertaining.
Yeah, just a bit.
The kind of unbelievable stuff you end up sharing late at night, just to watch the other person's jaw drop.
So, buckle up. We're venturing into the historical uncanny valley. What you're about to hear often blurs the line between, verifiable fact and the stuff of nightmares. We'll be navigating through documented atrocities, whispers of rumor,
political spin, and outright folklore.
Okay.
We'll do our best to separate what we can prove from what's purely legend, but let's be clear from the start. Even the documented truth about some of these individuals is just so extreme.
So far beyond the pale, it feels like it has to be fiction.
But it isn't. These are the stories of people who, through their own horrifying actions or, the profound fears they inspired, became history's accidental vampires.
And to really get what makes a historical figure vampire-like, we need to look beyond the Hollywood cliches, right?
Totally. Fangs and capes aren't really it here.
The connections often lie in much more fundamental human fears and phenomena that back then were poorly understood, often misinterpreted.
Okay, let's unpack this. What are the key ingredients? What makes someone from history feel like they could step out of a vampire tale? We've put together what we're calling the Grizzly Checklist.
Perfect name for it. First up, extreme cruelty and sadism.
Right.
And this goes beyond just the typical violence of their time. We're talking about a pattern of inventive, prolonged cruelty, often with a psychological element.
Like, who are we talking about here?
Think figures like Vlad the Impaler, Elizabeth Bathory, Gilles Ray. The accusations against them involved torture, mass killings, stuff that went way beyond the usual brutality of their eras.
So with Vlad, for example, it wasn't just killing.
No, it was the method, the slow, agonizing impalement, designed, really, to inflict maximum suffering. It's horrific.
Okay, what else is on the checklist?
Then there's the blood fixation, which can be real or, symbolic.
Blood. Makes sense. Core of the vampire myth.
Exactly. Historically, this pops up as direct accusations drinking blood, bathing in it like with Vlad and Bathory.
Though the Bathory bloodbaths are probably myth, right?
Almost certainly. But even if the literal blood consumption is unlikely, an intense focus on bloodshed. Think Vlad's forests of impaled bodies.
Or Bathory's alleged torture chambers running with blood.
Or Duray's massacres.
Yeah.
It all creates this powerful symbolic link. Taps into that primal fear, that fascination with blood.
Okay, cruelty, blood. What's next? This is grim.
It is. What's fascinating, though, is the post-mortem strangeness and revenant behavior.
A revenant, like returning from the grave.
Precisely. This is where folklore really kicks in. Many early vampire cases involved people believed to return from the grave to torment the living, often blamed for spreading disease or causing deaths.
Like Peter Plagojewicz.
Yeah.
And Arnold Paul.
Exactly. And Mercy Brown, later on. When their bodies were dug up, they were found in states that people misinterpreted, looking undecomposed, showing signs of life.
Which fit perfectly with those old European revenant traditions, the dead rising to plague the living. Creepy.
Very. And finally on the checklist, occult dabbling or heretical associations.
Okay, so like alchemy, demons.
Yeah, involvement in things like alchemy, summoning demons. Gilles de Rais was known for this, or alleged witchcraft, Satanism. Both Bathory and de Rais were linked to that kind of thing.
So it put them outside the norm, made them seem evil.
Pretty much. It associated them with dark forces beyond the natural world, much like the vampire itself. Added another layer of monstrousness.
So it's this combination of factors: cruelty, blood, weirdness after death, and maybe some occult stuff.
Right, but these reputations didn't just appear out of nowhere. They were usually the result of a really potent mix of societal factors, a kind of perfect storm.
Let's talk about that perfect storm. Disease panics must have been huge, right? Before germ theory?
Oh, massive. Devastating illnesses were terrifying. mysterious. Think about tuberculosis consumption.
Wasting away, pallor, coughing blood, and it spread through families.
Exactly. Easy to believe the dead were literally draining the life from the living. Even the plague, with its bleeding legions, fueled those fears. If you're watching your family die off one by one.
You might grasp at supernatural explanations. Makes sense.
And misunderstandings about decomposition played a major role too. Without modern embalming, or even a basic understanding of what happens after death.
Natural processes look totally unnatural.
Right. Bloating could make a body look well-fed. Purging fluids, mistaken for fresh blood. Skin slippage might look like new skin.
And hair and nails seeming to grow.
Just the skin retracting. Plus, burial conditions mattered hugely. A body in a cold, damp crypt in winter, like with Mercy Brown.
Would decompose much slower, looking preserved.
Leading to suspicion. Definitely.
And you can't forget propaganda and politics, can you?
Absolutely not. History's often written by the winners, or at least the powerful. Tales of monstrous cruelty were super effective for demonizing enemies.
Like those German pamphlets about Vlad the Impaler, spreading wild stories.
Exactly. And think about Bathory or Gilles de Rais. Powerful figures, maybe targeted for political reasons, accusations exaggerated, maybe even fabricated to ruin them.
A way to get rid of rivals, grab their land or wealth.
It was a powerful tool. You discredit them, associate them with pure evil.
And underlying all this, just general social anxiety and existing folklore.
Yeah, people already had beliefs about restless spirits, the dead, harming the living. This folklore provided a framework, a way to explain the inexplicable.
Sudden deaths, disease outbreaks, a ruler's shocking cruelty.
Right. And folklore offered a sense of control, too. Rituals like exhumation, staking. People believed they could actually fight these evils. Gave them agency against the unknown.
So who are the historical figures who really fit this terrifying profile? Our research turned up a seriously creepy list.
Oh, yeah. We're talking names like Vlad the Impaler, obviously.
Yeah.
The guy whose name became synonymous with Dracula.
Elizabeth Bathory, the Hungarian blood countess. The stories are just...
Gilles de Rais, the French hero turned, monster.
Can't forget Peter Plagojewicz and Arnold Pell, the Serbian peasants who really kicked off that 18th century vampire craze.
Absolutely critical cases.
Yeah.
And then there's Mercy Brown, the Rhode Island farm girl. A chillingly late example from New England.
We even had some honorable mentions, didn't we? People who didn't quite make the top 5.
Yeah, figures like Joe Grando, even earlier than the Servian cases. Fritz Harman, much later, a German serial killer, cannibal. Different kind of horror. And those spooky New Orleans stories, that blend of folklore and crime.
So choosing our top 5 for this bizarre journey on lifespan must have been tough. What were the criteria?
Well, a few things. First, sheer shock value. The crazy WTF stuff, basically.
I have that.
Second, how strongly the figures actually linked to those core vampire themes we talked about.
Right, the cruelty, blood, post-mortem stuff.
And finally, the narrative potential. How compelling, how detailed is their story. We wanted figures who horrify their own time, but whose stories still fascinate and unnerve us today.
Okay, so after weighing all that, seriously unsettling evidence, we've narrowed it down.
Our top 5. The figures who best represent this dark intersection of history and the vampire myth are Vlad the Impaler.
No surprise there.
Elizabeth Bathory, Gilles de Rais, Peter Plagojewicz, and Arnold Pale. We're looking at their cases together. They're so intertwined.
Makes sense.
And Mercy Brown.
That's our lineup. We even put together a quick table sort of comparing their key WTF acts, the strength of the vampire link, and the history versus legend ratio for each.
Yeah, helps to see it laid out. So let's dive into the first one. A name everyone knows, at least connection with vampires.
Yeah.
Vlad the Impaler.
Absolutely. Forget Bram Stoker for just a second. Before Count Dracula, the name belonged to a real man, Vlad III, Prince of Wallachia, born around 1431, and his story.
Way more terrifying than any fictional vampire. Seriously.
His name, Dracula. It came from his father's membership in the Order of the Dragon, right?
Right, a knightly order. But in Romanian, it also carried this chilling double meaning, son of the dragon or son of the devil.
Oof. Even without supernatural powers, he was a figure of absolute terror.
His reign was defined by that signature execution method, earned him the nickname Cipe the Impaler.
And it wasn't quick. He used thick, rounded stakes, not sharp ones.
Exactly, so they wouldn't pierce vital organs too quickly. The stake often went through the anus or vagina, then hoisted upright, letting gravity do the gruesome work.
Could take days for someone to die like that. Just imagine the terror.
He used it liberally, One horrific example.
Huh.
Hundreds of rival voyeurs, nobles he blamed for his father and brother's deaths.
Invited them to a feast, didn't he?
Yep. Then had the older ones immediately impaled. The younger ones forced on a brutal march to rebuild his castle. Many died just from exhaustion.
And these boyars, they were the powerful noble class. He saw them as treacherous.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Responsible for a lot of instability. He didn't just target political enemies either.
No, he used impalement against Saxon merchants, villagers, burning towns, leaving these forests of staked bodies.
It wasn't just punishment. It was deliberate psychological warfare. Pure terror tactic.
And the most infamous example of that, Sultan Mehmed II in 1462.
Oh, yeah. The force of the impaled. When the Sultan invaded, Vlad retreated towards his capital, Targoviat. When the Ottoman army arrived, no soldiers waiting.
Just bodies.
A vast plain covered with the impaled bodies of thousands of captured Ottoman soldiers and Bulgarian Muslims. Some sources say over 20,000.
Arranged in circles. Highest ranks on the tallest stakes.
That's the description. It was so utterly horrifying, so demoralizing, that even the battle-hardened Sultan reportedly turned his whole army around and retreated. Just imagine seeing that.
Unbelievable. And the horror stories didn't stop there, did they? Those German pamphlets.
Right. Likely fueled by Saxon survivors, anti-Vlad propaganda, painted him as this monster dining among the impaled, enjoying the view.
Some even claimed he dipped bread in their blood.
Yeah, those specific acts are hard to verify. Probably exaggerated propaganda to demonize him. But they stuck. Massively contributed to his monstrous reputation.
There are other chilling anecdotes, too, like nailing turbans to envoys' heads.
When they refused to remove him. Or the story of the merchant, the stolen ducats, the extra coin. If he hadn't reported the extra one, a stake was waiting.
It paints a picture of just absolute ruthless control. What are the death toll estimates?
Conservative estimates suggest somewhere between 40,000 and 100,000 people. Just staggering numbers.
But where did this extreme ruthlessness come from? His youth was pretty rough, wasn't it?
Pivotal. He spent years as a political hostage in the Ottoman Empire with his younger brother Radu, sent there by his father to ensure loyalty.
And he saw them use impalement there.
Witnessed it firsthand. Discipline was harsh. While Radu apparently adapted, Vlad grew to despise his captors.
And while he was gone, his father and older brother were murdered by those Wallachian boyars.
Exactly. Powerless to stop it. That period, that betrayal, likely fueled his deep-seated hatred for both the Ottomans and his own treacherous nobles, set the stage for his bloody vengeance later.
You can see how it shaped him. So how did this brutal warlord become the vampire?
Well, Bram Stoker definitely used the name Dracula and the Transylvania Wallachian setting for his novel in 1897. That's undeniable.
And Vlad's existing terrifying reputation, amplified by those 15th century German pamphlets and woodcuts showing him eating among the impaled,
Provided incredibly fertile ground. Stoker likely came across these stories. The historical Vlad's cruelty, the impalement evoking the stake, right? Those blood-drinking legends, even if propaganda.
There are irresistible elements for Stoker's creation. The real-life violence was so extreme, it made the supernatural stuff seem almost plausible.
Cemented that connection in the popular imagination. But it's so important to remember the duality here.
Right. In Romania, he's often seen very differently.
As a national hero, a fierce defender against the Ottomans, someone who imposed order, fought corruption, albeit brutally. His ruthlessness framed as necessary for survival.
And his actions, horrific as they were, happened in a brutal 15th century context. Constant warfare.
Exactly. While the mass impalements are documented, those specific tales of dining with the dead, dipping bread in blood, very likely embellishments by his enemies.
So ultimately, a human monster.
Undeniably a monster by modern standards, but entirely human, born from vengeance, political necessity, maybe intense trauma. It was the sheer documented horror of his life that made him the perfect figure for the vampire legend to latch onto. Guaranteed his terrifying immortality.
Okay, moving from the battlefield to the noble courts. Our next figure, Elizabeth Bathory, the Blood Countess. Another contender for extreme cruelty, but different, right?
Very different. If Vlad was about brutal efficiency, Bathory's story leans into alleged sadistic pleasure. born 1560, powerful Hungarian noble family, accused of torturing and murdering potentially hundreds of young women in her castles, especially duchess.
The scale is just mind-boggling. Guinness World Record mention.
Yep, for most prolific female murderer, though based on those higher, perhaps exaggerated numbers. The contrast between her nobility and the alleged depravity is what's so chilling.
The accusations paint this picture of relentless, inventive sadism, mostly against servant girls.
Initially, yes. Later, allegedly, young noblewomen sent to her for, ironically, education.
And the methods described in witness testimonies, it sounds like a literal torture chamber.
Needles under fingernails, biting off flesh, burning with irons or candles, even on genitals, slashing, beating, forcing them naked into freezing water or snow until they died.
Covering them in honey for insects, starvation, it's just sadistic.
The sheer variety and cruelty suggest deep-seated sadism. Some accounts even mention a device like the mythical Iron Maiden, with internal blades, supposedly used to pierce victims and collect blood.
Ugh. And the intimate, often sexual nature of the alleged assaults points to sadistic gratification.
It seems that way. Now, what's interesting is Bathory herself was never formally tried, likely because of her noble status.
But rumors had been swirling for years, especially after her husband died in 1604.
Yes, initially accusations about peasant girls were seemingly ignored. Things changed when daughters of lesser nobility reportedly started disappearing.
That's when King Matthias II ordered the investigation, led by her own cousin, Thurzo.
Right, in 1610. His men raided Octa's castle in December, reportedly found dead and dying girls. Bathory was placed under house arrest.
But her servants were tried.
4 of them. Arrested, interrogated, likely under torture, and tried in 1611. They confessed to numerous murders, numbers varying from 36 to over 50.
And they all implicated Bathory.
As the orchestrator. There's even a second-hand claim of a list with 650 victims in her handwriting, though that's debated.
What happened to the servants?
3 were brutally executed, fingers torn off, burned alive, or beheaded and burned. 1 got life imprisonment. Bathory remained walled up in her castle rooms until her death in 1614.
Now, big vampire link. Bathing in virgin blood for youth. That's the image everyone knows.
The blood countess image. But it's almost certainly a myth.
Really? Not in the original accounts?
Nope. Doesn't appear in any contemporary accounts or witness testimonies. The story only surfaced in writing over a century after her death.
So the popular origin story, striking a maid, seeing blood rejuvenate her skin, pure folklore.
Pure folklore. But you can see why that image, a noblewoman obsessed with blood for eternal youth, resonates so strongly with vampire tropes.
Which raises the question, was she guilty? Or maybe framed? There's a conspiracy theory angle, isn't there?
There is. Some historians lean that way. As a wealthy, influential widow controlling vast estates, she could have been seen as a threat.
And King Matthias II owed her family money, which was conveniently canceled.
Reportedly, yes. Her lands were desirable to rivals, including Thurzo, her cousin who led the investigation. Plus, she was a powerful Protestant woman in a politically charged time, maybe a challenge to Habsburg power.
The fact her cousin led the investigation, the coerced testimony, her lack of a trial, it does sound suspicious.
It does lend some weight to those ideas. There's a lot of hearsay in the statements, too.
But surely the sheer number of testimonies suggests something was going on, even if exaggerated.
That's the crucial point. Untangling Bathory is complicated. Nobles had immense power over servants then. Cruelty wasn't unheard of.
But the scale and nature of these accusations go way beyond typical abuse.
Far beyond. So, while bloodbaths are myth, and politics likely played a role, dismissing all accusations is hard. There's even a letter from a minister in 1602, years before the big investigation, complaining about the excessive cruelty of both Bathory and her husband.
Right, so the verdict is...
Probably somewhere in the middle. Likely a cruel, abusive woman, possibly a sadist. The legend of bloodbaths is a later exaggeration, reflecting anxieties about female power, aging, projected onto her dark reputation.
The exact victim count, unknown. But the shadow she cast was long and bloody.
Definitely a chilling figure, myth or reality.
Okay, next up, a figure whose fall from grace is just astonishing. Gilles de Rais.
Gilles de Rais lived around 1405 to 1440. A figure of incredible contrast. Brett Baron, Marshal of France, celebrated hero alongside Joan of Arc.
Fought at the Siege of Orleans, stood by Joan at the coronation, a national hero.
Absolutely. Yet this hero descended into unimaginable depravity, accused of abducting, torturing, sexually abusing, and murdering scores, possibly hundreds of children.
Making him one of history's earliest documented serial killers.
Arguably, yes. A stark reminder that heroes can harbor terrible darkness.
He retired from military life around 1434, 1435. Disgraced, isolated.
Seems that way. And his dark side really took over then. Rumors started spreading around his castles, Tifauge, Machacoul about children disappearing.
And his own servants were procuring them, luring or kidnapping.
That's what was revealed. Young boys mainly, some girls. Taken to the castle. According to confessions, subjected to horrific torture, sexual abuse, sodomy was a specific charge, and then murdered in secluded tower rooms.
The victim numbers are all over the place, dozens to maybe 200 plus.
And very wildly.
Yeah.
Witnesses later testified to seeing servants disposing of bodies. One horrifying account describes Reyes ordering servants to dig up the skeletal remains of about 40 kids from a Cathedral tower before he sold it.
Dig them up and move them.
Move them in chests to another location to be burned, according to the account. For years, fear and the low status of the families kept anyone from acting. Shows the power he wielded.
And adding another layer, alchemy and the occult.
Yeah, he squandered his huge wealth on extravagant living, theatrical productions, then turned desperately to alchemy and the occult to magically restore his fortune.
Employed sorcerers, alchemists, tried to summon demons.
Francesco Prelati was a key figure. Rituals aimed at summoning a demon called Baron for knowledge and riches. This actually formed the basis for the heresy charge against him, linked his earthly crimes to supernatural evil.
So, what triggered his downfall? Not the murders directly.
No, it was violently abducting a clergyman in 1440 over a castle sale dispute. Attacking a church official finally spurred the authorities to act.
Leading to 2 trials, ecclesiastical and civil.
Correct. Initially, he was defiant, refused to plead, but faced with excommunication and torture, he dramatically confessed.
To everything. Heresy, sodomy, serial child murder.
Yes. Detailed confessions, corroborated by accomplices and parents. He was condemned, executed by hanging and burning in Nantes in October 1440.
And the bizarre twist. Praised posthumously for his remorse.
Strange, isn't it? Seen as a model of Christian penitence at the end.
Now, Gilles de Rais is often linked to the fairy tale Bluebeard, right? Wealthy nobleman, dark secret, murders in a castle.
Seems plausible on the surface, but the link is actually quite tenuous, likely a later development.
Because Bluebeard killed his wives, Rais killed children.
Primarily, yes. No solid historical evidence. Perrault based his tale directly on Rais. Maybe some indirect folkloric influence from Brittany, but the popular association really took hold in the 19th century.
So the Bluebeard connection adds mystique, but probably not accurate. What drove him to it? Any theories?
Mostly speculation. Losing parents young, raised by a potentially brutal grandfather, withdrawal from military life, disgrace after Joan of Arc's capture, financial ruin leading to occultism. It's a disturbing trajectory.
Have people questioned his guilt? Trial irregularities?
Some revisionists have. Confession under threat of torture, the Duke of Brittany benefiting financially, but the sheer weight of evidence, multiple confessions, witnesses, leads most historians to conclude he was guilty.
A chilling reminder of unchecked power and privilege.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And while he lacks the undead or blood-drinking elements, his predatory crimes against innocents, that's a different but horrifying kind of historical vampire, a monster hiding in plain sight.
Okay, let's shift focus now to Serbia and the spark that really ignited the big European vampire panic in the 18th century, Peter Prgojevic and Arnold Pale.
Exactly. Forget Transylvania for a sec. These events in rural Serbia under Austrian military administration are ground zero for the vampire phenomenon as we know it.
And what makes them so significant is
they were investigated and documented by seemingly rational Austrian officials, doctors, military commanders. The reports, filled with gruesome details, spread like wildfire across Enlightenment Europe.
giving chilling credibility to ancient superstitions.
Precisely. Official documentation inadvertently validating popular belief. Fascinating stuff. These weren't tales of aristocrats, but sheer peasant terror.
Stemming from the belief the dead could rise and prey on the living.
Right. The nightmare in Kisilova started after Peter Prgojevic died in 1725. Within 8 days, 9 other villagers died. Mysteriously.
And on their deathbeds, they claimed Prgojevic visited them, suffocated them.
That was the claim. Even his widow said he returned, though just for his shoes, apparently. To the villagers, these visits, the deaths, clear signs of a revenant.
So they demanded his body be exhumed, threatened to leave the village.
Yep. Said similar things happened in Turkish times. Meanwhile, a similar horror in Medwegna with Arnold Pale.
The former soldier who died in an accident around 1726.
That's him. Crucially, Pale himself had talked about being attacked by a vampire before in Ottoman territory and curing himself with grave soil and blood. Folk remedy stuff.
So when people started dying after his death, blaming him,
They dug him up after 40 days, found what they believed were signs of vampirism, staked and burned him.
but the terror didn't end there.
No. 5 years later, another wave of deaths. 17 people in under 3 months. This time, blamed on victims supposedly infected by Pale or cattle he'd preyed on.
Leading to a second, bigger investigation and mass exhumations.
Right, and this is where the official reports get really bizarre.
The Austrian officials documented what they saw, like Frambald at Plagojewicz's exhumation.
Reluctantly present, yes. Documented the body was completely fresh, undecomposed except the nose, no foul odor, and, disturbingly, fresh blood in his mouth.
Which the locals believed he'd sucked from victims.
Exactly. When staked, Frambald reported a great amount of completely fresh blood flowing from the ears and mouth. Then they burned him.
And the reports on Pale and his alleged victims, similar findings?
Very similar. The detailed report by Surgeon Fluckinger described Pale's exhumed body as undecomposed, fresh blood at orifices, apparent new nailskin growth. When staked, Pale reportedly let out a frightful shriek, bled profusely.
And they cataloged the other bodies from the second outbreak, finding similar vampirism signs.
Meticulously. Bloating, fluid blood, lack of decay in many. Those deemed vampires were decapitated, burned, ashes thrown in the river.
Wow. And these cases became sensations because they were documented by officials?
Exactly. Reports like Schambald's, Fluckinger's Visum et Repertum, which became a bestseller, were translated, circulated widely.
So educated circles in Europe were suddenly discussing Serbian vampires based on seemingly credible official accounts.
Yep. Gave this paradoxical reality to folklore, sparking the vampire controversy of the 1730s. Intense debate among intellectuals.
By looking back, it's clear they were just seeing misunderstood decomposition, right?
Almost certainly. Lack of decay due to burial conditions. Bloating, forcing fluids out. Skin slippage looking like new growth. Trapped gases escaping upon staking, causing shrieks.
And maybe cultural clashes, too. Austrian bureaucracy versus Balkan folk beliefs.
Possibly played a role. These cases perfectly illustrate how fear, superstition, lack of science transform natural decay into the supernatural. Validated unintentionally by official reports.
The peasants saw death through folklore, and the reports broadcast that vision.
You hit the nail on the head. A powerful, unintentional consequence.
Okay, while the 18th century had that panic, the fear persisted much later, even across the Atlantic. Our final stop, Mercy Brown.
Exeter, Rhode Island. Surprisingly late, 1892. The tragic story of Mercy Lena Brown.
And this is a key example of the New England vampire panic.
One of the last and best documented. Very different context, though. Not aristocrats or ancient Balkan folklore. This was desperate American farm families facing tuberculosis.
Consumption, they called it, and it ravaged Mercy's family.
Absolutely devastated them. Carl George Brown's wife died in '83, eldest daughter a few years later. Then in '91, both 19-year-old Mercy and his son Edwin got sick.
And because TB wiped out households, this folk belief developed.
That a deceased family member, now undead, was draining the life force from the living relatives, causing them to waste away with the same disease.
So as Edwin got weaker, neighbors convinced George Brown to exhume his dead wife and daughters.
Desperate measures in desperate times to find the vampire responsible.
And they did it, March 17th, 1892, with villagers, a doctor, even a reporter.
They did. The wife and older daughter, buried for years, showed expected decomposition. But Mercy, she'd only died 2 months prior, in January.
And her body looked
Remarkably well preserved. Color in her cheeks, reported liquid blood in her heart and liver. To the terrified onlookers, this was undeniable proof.
Proof she was undead and feeding on Edwin. Oh my God.
Imagine the shock, the fear. What followed was this gruesome folk remedy straight out of European lore.
They cut out her heart and liver.
Yes. Took them to a rock, burned them to ashes, mixed the ashes with water to make a tonic.
And fed it to Edwin to cure him.
Tragically futile. He died just 2 months later.
So the New England vampire panic, it was an adaptation of older beliefs focused on TB.
Exactly. The idea was the first to die could return as this spectral drain. Interestingly, not directly tied to Eastern European immigration. This practice of exhuming and performing rituals was documented in several rural communities there in the 18th and 19th centuries.
What's shocking is how late this happened, 1892. Science was advancing.
Right, but Mercy's preservation had a natural explanation. Died in January New England winter, body likely stored in an above-ground vault until spring thaw.
Effectively refrigerated.
Pretty much.
Oh.
The liquid blood in the heart. Normal postmortem finding. Even contemporary newspapers called it a horrible superstition.
Just shows the desperation against an incurable, terrifying disease, clinging to folk remedies.
And the tragic irony. Her father, George Brand, lived until 1922, long enough to see the development of the BCG vaccine that helped control TB.
Wow. And Mercy's story resonated culturally, influenced Stoker, Lovecraft.
Potentially ensuring her place as America's most famous, maybe last real vampire.
So from Wallachia's impaled forests to Hungary's bloody legends, France's haunted castles, Serbia's plagued villages, and New England's cursed farms, this bizarre journey shows history doesn't need fiction to create monsters.
Not at all. We've seen documented cruelty, bizarre rituals born from terror and misunderstanding, how disease, politics, superstition create figures straight out of nightmares.
Vlad, Bathory, Durace, Plagojevitz, Pale, and Mercy Brown, their testimonies paint this disturbing picture. Verifiable horror mixed with enduring folklore.
It really makes you wonder why these centuries-old tales still grip us, doesn't it?
Morbid curiosity, confronting our brutal past.
Maybe. A time when the line between natural and supernatural was so thin, when people blamed plagues on the dead rising, when unchecked power enabled unspeakable acts.
These stories challenge our view of history. It wasn't always rational or enlightened.
Often brutal, baffling, steeped in fear, the ultimate WTF moments, testimonies so bizarre we can't help but retell them.
And these 5 testimonies, they're more than just history. Potent narratives of human darkness, societal fear, myth origins. Exactly the kind of mind-bending, stranger-than-fiction stories we explore here on the Lifespan podcast.
Vlad's terror, Bathory's alleged sadism and conspiracy, the Ray's fall, the Serbian panic fueled by official reports, Mercy Brown's tragedy. Each a chilling glimpse into history's dark side.
These are the kinds of stories guaranteed to leave you wide-eyed, questioning the past, whispering, and then you won't believe what happened next.
Right.
History's vampires might not have had fangs, but their stories bite just as hard. Share, rate, and follow Lifespan for more wild stories.
Please do.
And as you go about your week, consider this. Which of these historical figures do you find the most truly terrifying? And what does that say about the feels that still linger with us today?